It is time for my favorite day of the week. We're going to break down the World of Warcraft logs for Mythic and Heroic in week 3. There are 3 guilds that have killed the final boss, Queen Ansarek of Mythic. We have several Mythic logs to look at today, as well as we're going to be looking at the top DPS on the last 2 bosses of Heroic for week 3, because we don't have logs for the last 2 bosses yet. However, I think you're going to be surprised to find that some of the classes are outperforming last week's classes by a lot. So stay tuned and we'll take a look and break it all down. Looking at overall DPS for Naruber Palace for Mythic over a range of 1 week in the 95th percentile. What in the fire mage is going on here? This makes no sense to me. I was not expecting to see this. However, there are 2 classes that scale exceptionally well with haste, and that is Fire Mage and Unholy Death Knight, and their stonks are rising on Mythic. If we change this over a range of 1 day, looks like it's about the same. So we'll keep it at a week. Enhancement Shaman is still performing very well. Arcane Mage performing very well. I have been playing a little bit of Fire Mage and Keys recently, and it's starting to feel better as you get more gear. I will say that. Now let's take it. If we change this down to Heroic, I think we can get a little bit more accurate of logs. There's a lot more logs to pull from. So looking at these, we have Enhancement Shaman, Arcane Mage on top, followed by Devastation Evoker, and Arms Warrior is outperforming Fury Warrior now in Heroic DPS numbers overall. And Sub Rogue appears to be outperforming every other rogue, which is news to me. I was not really expecting to see that. But if we change this to Mythic, you can see that sub-rogue stonks fall way down when it comes to Mythic. However, I do believe that Liquid was using a sub-rogue on the final boss of Queen Ansarek for straight-up boss damage. And they were using a Fury Warrior, which was top on DPS, and then Arcane Mage was second. So, that being said, let's take a look at some reports, and we will drop this down to, let's just look at one boss at a time. First boss is primarily single target with a bunch of ads that come out. And it appears to be no contest that Frost DKs are completely dominating the show still when it comes to the Mythic first boss, doing nearly 2 million DPS when all the ads are out. They're just able to do so much burst and consistent AoE damage to those ads in every single phase that there's almost no competition. 1 Unholy DK, 1 Exceptional Fire Mage, and a couple of Demon Hunters are able to keep up. If we move to the third boss, this is a pure single target fight, so I'm expecting to see some BM Hunters here. And yes, there are still BM Hunters are still the kings of single target, along with Arcane Mage and Enhancement Shamans in for a close second and third. And if we take a look at Brood Twister, the big AoE Mythic fight, we actually have some logs on this week for Mythic. So we are able to see that there are a lot more DKs, as I would expect. Just Frost DKs kind of running the show here on this boss. And as we continue to get more logs on this boss, I imagine that we will see even more Frost DKs in the top 100. And Fury Warriors able to perform very well in this fight as well. If we swap this down to Heroic, have a lot more logs, and we'll get to see some outstanding performers here. People that have, really high item level gear, probably at the top. 626 Paladins, 624 Warriors are able to compete no matter what. But 2.2 million consistent damage on this fight is pretty insane. Frost DKs just absolutely still the kings of AoE when it comes to raid is what it's looking like. And then Queen Ansarek on Heroic, I think we should have primarily Fury Warriors at the top. Their burst windows on the nets, sorry, the little eggs when you get rooted, tends to be the highest. They just have the best profile, and 1.5 minute cooldowns line up really well with just being able to destroy these eggs when people get rooted. Demon Hunters are actually starting to rise. Like, you see more Demon Hunters than you did in the past weeks, and they are actually looking to be contenders in raid for this tier. So definitely be looking for Demon Hunters and Fury Warriors to be top on the last boss of Queen Ansarek. If you look at Liquid's log, it was Fury Warrior, Mage, and then Devastation Evoker, I believe, were top 3 on the last kill. And that's just because it's a good mixture of burst damage windows and timing your CDs, and of course fired up on the mage, getting like PIs and stuff like that really helps. So that's going to be primarily it for the changes in rating this week. What I'm more concerned with now is, where is the meta going with Mythic Plus. So there is a bit of a meta forming here. If we take a look at some of the top keys that have been timed, it was mainly Guardian Druids on top last week, and now it appears to me that warriors are starting to rise in the high level keys. And you can see in the top 20 keys that have been timed, there's only resto shamans. There's a very clear meta in the healer category, and that is resto shaman only. There is no other healer that anyone is even using in high keys, as it would seem. I imagine that it could be Preservation Evoker would be the only other healer that could take their place. But the fact that you have Augment Evoker as the primary damage dealer in keys, there is not really a place to bring two of the same class in high level keys. You do see it here with Enhanced Shaman Resto, because Enhancement Shaman, Ellie Shaman are actually very good. But for the most part, I think that the meta at really high keys is probably not going to be two of the same class. You're probably going to want a mage there instead of a Enhancement Shaman or Ellie. However, we'll see how the meta starts to form. But right now in the S tier category, it's looking like tank has 3 different choices: Vengeance Demon Hunter, Guardian Druid, and Prot Warrior. Healer has 1 choice, Resto Shaman, and DPS has several choices here. What's strange is that Unholy is actually starting to rise up here. Unholy and Frost DK are both performing exceptionally well in keys, and I didn't expect to see that, but the majority of them are Frost Knights, Frost DKs, except for at the very top, we are seeing some Unholy DKs in these newly timed 13 and 14, high level 13 and 14 keys. The Chinese comp is sometimes running an Unholy DK, which is interesting. I didn't expect to see that. So that's one change that's different this week. Speed of Life is running Assassin Rogue. Casual Addict is playing sub in some of these keys. In the top 20, if we scroll down, we have a Casual Addict playing Assass. When our Assassin Rogue is one of the best in higher level keys, specifically because they're poisons. They like to stack poisons and sort of rot the damage on the targets, and you need the mobs to live for a good bit of time for Assassination Rogue to be really good in keys, similar to like a Fire Mage profile, which, you know, we might see Fire Mage later on in keys. It looks like Riley Mage is already playing fire in some of these keys and some of the high level 13s, which is cool to see. Usually you start to see Fire Mage come in when they get a lot more gear towards the end of the tier. And Semage is actually playing fire in one of these high level keys, which is really cool. A lot of times they're playing Frost, though. It looks like Frost is slowly becoming the meta. Although you do see every spec of Arcane in the top 20. Or, sorry, every spec of Mage in the top 20. You see Arcane, Frost, and Fire. But maybe Frost is becoming the meta just simply for control. They can do a really good sustained DPS. They're not necessarily playing around their cooldowns as much, so they can just consistently do a lot of damage, which is a great profile for Frost Mage. But the main thing is like the control of the slow, so that the tank can live and sort of kite around the blizzards and whatnot. Gives more survivability to the tanks when they're just consistently slowed. And Frost Death Knight has a similar profile to Frost Mage, where they just both consistently pump damage, where they're not necessarily playing around their cooldowns too much, which I think is awesome. So that could be the meta. Frost DK, Frost Mage, Aug Evoker is the top time key right now, or Akara 14. In the S tier for DPS, we have Augment Evoker, DK, Mage of pretty much any spec, with Frost Mage, Arcane, and then Fire. We have Unholy Death Knight, and even though Unholy is the top key, I would say Frost DK is still the meta, and Unholy Death Knight maybe second after that. We have Assassination Rogue in the S tier, and Enhancement Shaman Ellie in the S tier as well. And then Balanced Druid also probably landing somewhere in the S tier, simply for the fact that they're ranged DPS with the battle res. Highly recommend that your comp runs at least 1 to 2 battle reses in case the battle reser dies. It can allow you to time really high keys if you have a backup res, which is why this team probably runs a Guardian Druid. That's pretty much it for the S tier. If you want to play an S tier class, I'd go with one of those. In the A tier, it looks like we have maybe Warlock, Affliction Lock. Let's keep on scrolling down and see if we can see if there's any other classes that might land in the A tier. Some of the other specs of Rogue, I think all 3 specs of Rogue are pretty viable right now. Fury Warriors, Arms Warriors are okay. They just don't synergize with comps very well, especially because a lot of teams are running Protection Warriors right now. So if you are going to run an Arms Warrior, then you more than likely have a Guardian Druid tank. This team has a Brewmaster. I wouldn't recommend DPSing as Warrior in high keys. They just don't fit into the meta very well. And they usually have a hard time getting into groups. Windwalker Monk is down pretty bad right now. Yeah, if you want to get into really high keys or get into keys consistently, then you're probably going to want to play one of the big 5, big 6 classes: Rogue, Mage, DK, Evoker, and maybe Shaman. It's just that Shaman doesn't fit into the meta right now too well because of the fact that most healers are Shaman, and running 2 of the same class just doesn't synergize well. Really quickly, we can look at the Archon DPS Mythic Plus content. So here you have a list of some of the DPS output. This score is a good metric to use because it provides a combination of damage, utility, and survivability to push high keys. Where you have there Aug Evoker, Mage, and Aug Evoker, DK, Mage, Rogue, Shaman, Boomy. These are the top classes right now. You don't really see crazy that Red Paladins do so much damage and they have decent survivability. I cannot believe that there are almost 0 Ret Paladins in all of the top keys. They just really don't fit into the meta very well. In like the top 100 to 150, you maybe see 3 or 4 Ret Paladins, which surprises me because you see them all over the place at the lower IO ratings. That's going to be it for week 3 top DPS of the week. I'm Sardako. If you like these videos, hit subscribe, and I will see you next week for top DPS of the week.